What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions for Fallout 76, which is certainly a bit of an odd video to make at the moment, not only because this game released some years ago, but also recent gaming news we're about to get into. But before I dive into any of that, I do actually need to inform you that while I did not receive a review key for this game in any capacity, obviously it's been quite some time since it released, back when Season 2 of the Fallout show launched, they sent out codes for that Burning Springs bundle, which was like the update at the time, and I did receive one of those from Bethesda. But given that that was like 7 months ago, you can see that I wasn't exactly in a hurry to cover this, which is one of the other things I want to mention. Because, as I said, this is a bit of an odd time to be covering Fallout 76, because not all that long ago, just a couple of weeks in fact, Xbox at large and Bethesda as well received quite a few job cuts in the form of various layoffs, and in particular, those hit Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76 pretty hard from what I understand. In fact, it's pretty likely that these updates for these games will slow down at the very least. So at least in some sense, I am coming into this right as it is about to see a pretty big shift in its long-term focus, I would imagine. However, I've been planning this video and the subsequent review to come for quite some time. I believe there's a video back towards the end of last year with me talking about the fact that I've just been avoiding it and that I've covered basically every other Fallout game besides I think Tactics at this point, and I needed to jump in and review this one. However, it comes with a couple of caveats, namely the fact that Fallout 76 and its main premise of being a multiplayer version of something like Fallout 4 in particular is just not super compelling to me. I don't like multiplayer games very generally. I'm not looking to play MMOs. I find live service content to be not my forte, let's say. Being a little less judicious than that, I will simply say that I have a sort of bitter distaste for the business model, in fact. And so, in the years since Fallout 76's launch, it's been pretty easy for me to avoid for that reason. But it really does feel like it's about time I got around to it, and thus here we are. So, it is probably worth a mention that this is not actually the first time I've ever played Fallout 76. I did have like a couple of hours in it prior to this, and I've spent much of my playtime with it so far just kind of getting to grips with all of the systems and the way everything is structured so I can come up with a sort of game plan to tackle it, because in no way should you expect this to be a 100% review. I don't think that makes any sense at all for multiplayer games, especially live service ones, and so my goal here is to basically see as much of the content and prior updates that they've put out to drastically change the game, like, bringing actual people into it, and kind of just talk about the game and the state that it's in now. And while I'm sure many people are well aware of like the launch debacle that went around with this game, the way they didn't have NPCs but then they were brought in, the more recent updates bringing map expansions like the Burning Springs thing I mentioned, and so my goal with the ultimate review of this is just going to be, what is the game like right now after all these years, and before obviously the shift that is going to come with all of those job losses. And I've got to say that's actually a pretty good place to start talking about this, because one of my concerns going into it was what the new player experience was like, because something that tends to happen with MMOs, live service games in general, is that over the years the new player experience tends to deteriorate pretty bad as they add more and more systems on top of everything, and I can definitely already confirm that that is the case here. In fact, I would say it's so easy to get just bombarded with information as you're stepping out of the vault for the first time here that it's definitely a little overwhelming. And it's not like they don't have anything to help you out. These days you can start the game with a level 20 boost, which I believe is just part of the base game. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong on that. But you can, when you make a new character now, choose to start at level 20 instead of 1. And that comes with like some gear and stuff to get you started. So I took advantage of that. I played around with it for about 5 or 6 levels. And then using the atoms that I received from the challenges, which is the in-game currency for your microtransactions, on top of the ones that came from that Burning Springs bundle, to buy the level 50 character boost, which is where like the main bit of character progression stops outside of things like items and things from what I understand. So as of right now, I've got a character that is level 50 and gear that comes with that, and I'm going to start plowing through the content at this point now that I've got the basics out of the way. But in so doing, probably also worth a mention that I just fundamentally do not like microtransaction shops. A lot of it is utility focused, like what I just mentioned, boosting myself up to level 50, and while I was able to do that in a way that didn't ultimately cost me any money, the combination of those things is something I have a bit of just inherent distaste for, that being effectively like pay to progress mechanics into the game, if not necessarily pay to win. And while I don't really care about the cosmetic stuff, all of it gets to be a bit much, especially this many years on. And that's before you even start talking about their Fallout First subscription, which gives you access to like private servers more or less. So yes, the microtransactions are pretty gross. But those aren't the only things I don't like about the game. If I'm being honest, I don't love the progression systems here. So the way this works, at least to the best of my knowledge at the moment, is that when you level up, you gain a point in a special stat up to a maximum of 15 here, until you get to level 50. At that point, you don't get the special point increase anymore, but you continue to get perk cards. Based on your number in a special stat, in addition to the basics it provides you, you can equip perk cards based on the max number of that particular stat for you. And this is where you're going to get like what are, in effect, perks and whatnot. And when you pick these perks, you can rank them up to make them stronger, and overall, it's fine, I guess. I just don't love this system, especially in combination with the progress around your weaponry and whatnot. So crafting is a really big deal in Fallout 76 from what I understand, and one of the ways in which you progress that crafting is by finding a bunch of stuff and then actually scrapping it to hopefully learn how to use mods from it, thus giving you the ability to craft the ultimate version of that weapon you actually want. And I've already got to tell you that I don't love that at all, because it kind of feels like you find something cool and then you wind up just throwing a bunch of them away until you can make the version of it you actually want, and it just kind of feels bad. But putting all of that to the side for a moment, I will say it's interesting to play through this game now that it has like NPCs and characters to do a lot of the tutorializing for you and to introduce you to things. Like you'll actually bump into the Overseer now as opposed to just hearing the logs. And you know, there's actually people to see and interact with basically everywhere, and that's where a lot of your quests come from now, and apparently it was just like robots and terminals and stuff previously, so I won't personally feel the exact weight of that shift, but having entered the game for the first time that way, it's been enjoyable enough. In particular, I find the story that they're setting up around the Scorched and everything, as well as the setting, which is kind of home to me, though not exactly West Virginia. I'm a good bit farther south, in fact, but seeing that setting and the way they've incorporated things like the cryptids, etc., is especially fun if the rest of it hasn't exactly been incredibly compelling by comparison. Now, you do, of course, have to share that setting with other players, which isn't all bad. You can occasionally team up for things like public events, which they have a system of pretty easily dropping in and out of, which means I haven't really found any need to actually interact with too many people outside of, again, just doing the event itself, but it's not like super heavy on communication or anything thus far, though I do understand that there's supposed to be something akin to like raids, more or less, and I'm going to try to experience some of that stuff just so I can speak on it a little in the actual review, but that's getting a bit off track. The story around the Scorched and everything does seem interesting to me, but what does concern me at the same time is I know there comes a point where you're like setting off nukes on the map, which just in the context of the lore of Fallout seems very silly, which I suppose leads me to another first impression of mine, which is that something that has always bothered me about this game is like the tone that they present is just kind of off to me. So you're trying to tell this like really serious story, but then, due to the nature of it being a multiplayer live service thing, you just kind of really lean into all this silly nonsense, and it's just a very conflicting thing that leaves the game tonally very off. Especially when you're sitting there trying to listen to the holotapes and everything about some like terrible event that has befallen someone before you got here. But then your UI is just kind of like exploding with public events and team-ups with people inevitably named ridiculous things, so you can hit what is effectively a slot machine for rewards to keep you engaged and playing, theoretically, pretty much immediately reminds me why I don't tend to play games like this. But While this video has been a little bit rambling, I do think I will go ahead and save some of it for the actual review itself. And again, just to provide some context for the end here, I don't know exactly how long reviewing this is going to take me, but as I mentioned, it will not be a 100%. I don't care if I even get all of the achievements in the process of reviewing this. I still won't be labeling it that way even if I do, just because of the live service nature of the game itself. And what's more, I'm giving myself a bit of a hard time limit that I'm going to keep to myself, that unless the game just really wows me and convinces me to keep playing beyond that point, which I'm not exactly, I would say, optimistic about, I'm going to play up to a maximum of an internal time limit that I've got in my own head and try to simply experience all the major content along the way. So because of those factors, it shouldn't theoretically take me too long. I would like to have this done by next weekend at the latest, and there I will go in a little bit more depth. But as first impressions go, I would say it's a bit of a mixed bag. There are things that I like here, but it's kind of hard to see them for all of the live service stuff that is front and center that I have never really enjoyed. But in spite of that, I am going to attempt to go through this with an open mind and just kind of experience the game for what it is and try to get a very clear picture of the entirety of the game these days. And as soon as I feel comfortable with all of that knowledge to actually sit down and record that review, then we will get to that point. But as for today, I think that's going to do it for first impressions. If you happen to be looking forward to that review, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. If you want to throw down anything in the comments about things you think I should check out or see before that review happens, by all means, feel free to do so. Certainly very open to hearing what people have to say about it. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.